presentation last night, and he said, I swear to God, he said, I've heard the same speech, exactly the same speech as I did at COP26, from exactly the same person, just with even more message. I'm going to listen in. You're doing the next panel as well, aren't you? So I'll listen in. I'll see. Hi.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. We're looking for sales boss for another but we have another
I sit on the board of a charity called Power of Nutrition. I also like it. Yeah, I don't know. I was going to say, very interested on what brings you comes.
Have a good one. I will.
So good morning, everybody. We're going to get started in just a second. Can you take your seats, please? That'd be great.
I really love my new team. Like I have scientists. I have Colombian lawyer.
I think I'll get you to come up in a second. So I'll invite you up. I think you can use here if that's okay, unless you prefer to stand and walk. So you can, You're welcome. Please come in. Come and find yourself a seat. There's a few spaces through here. Brilliant. Okay. Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this session. My name is Matt Jones. I'm the head of Nature Economy at UN Environment Programme's World Conservation Monitoring Centre, and it's a pleasure to welcome you all here. It's a pleasure to have you all join us today. Welcome to this panel, which is organised by the Just Rural Transition and the Good Food Finance Network. We're here to talk about financing a sustainable and just food system and how leading financial institutions and value chain actors have set concrete targets and take action. This is the implementation COP after all, and we know that commitments without implementation are not going to get us anywhere. So it's great to be here. It's great to actually be in this pavilion, a pavilion dedicated to conversation about food systems, because we know that systemic problems need systemic solutions, and it's great that that's what we're able to really talk about today and fit in with the ethos of what's happening in this space. That's because we know that while agriculture is responsible for about a third of emissions, only 3% of public climate finance is flowing towards tackling that. So we're here to raise awareness of the impact potential of finance for sustainable and equitable food systems and how that can help tackle multiple global issues in combination. And we're also going to discuss how financial actors are raising their ambition level so that investment in sustainable food systems can then lead on to really concrete action. So we're going to hear examples of those actions from the Good Food Finance Network's High Ambition Group. Before we get into that, just one quick note on antitrust. Please don't discuss pricing or any other sensitive topics in this panel. So delighted to welcome you all here, delighted to welcome my fantastic lineup of speakers and panelists. And we're going to start. I'm honored to be able to invite Diane Holdorf, who's the Executive Vice President of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Diane, please set the scene for us.
Hey everybody, thank you Matt so much. How's the sound? Can you hear me okay? Feels like we've got a bit of competition going on for the noise in here. But it's so good to see so many of you. It's wonderful to be here. I am so glad that this event today is being held on Finance Day. I think that's incredibly important. There's quite a large number of big announcements going out today during COP27's Finance Days, but I've not yet seen one on food, despite the fact that this is the most coverage and engagement that we've had on food and agricultural systems, I think, of any climate COP. That's incredibly compelling, very important, but I'm here to continue to push us to raise our ambition, raise our voice, and raise the visibility. So let me talk just a little bit about what it is we're here today for, because the fact that we are bringing together a very high ambition group of finance sector leaders on food and agricultural metrics and targets is critically important. As Matt said, I'm Diane Holdorf. I'm with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. WBCSD is so incredibly proud to partner with the Just Rural Transition and the Good Food Finance Network, together with UNEP, together with Meridian, together with Food Systems for the Future, FAIR, EAT, so many good partners involved in this work. And I think that in and of itself shows how much we are driving collective ambition and action on this finance agenda. Matt, you already spoke a little bit to the numbers, why it's so important. The fact that we're here in this room means I don't need to repeat it. You know the role that agriculture and food systems play in climate, but also in nature loss, and incredibly importantly, in equity and just transitions and systems, which I want to highlight because this finance transition that we're talking about, the targets that we're setting, have to be grounded in the just transition, in the fact that we've got to be creating equity all the way down to farm level. So we have a lot of different examples of where we're seeing financing mechanisms start to work really, really well. I'm going to highlight just one as we set the scene before we move in. This is an area that Just Rural Transition and Good Food Finance Network are both deeply involved in, and it has to do with transitioning rice practices and the livelihoods of rice farmers. Rice, of course, feeds 3.5 billion people a day, supports the livelihoods of 1 billion people, primarily in the kinds of economies and markets where transitional finance support is so necessary and yet so challenging to get into smallholder farmers' hands. The fact that we've got a Sustainable Rice Landscapes Initiative report launching on the finance needs here really starts to show how we can get to the type of blended finance facility into a multi-country, single crop context that can really drive the action on the ground that is starting to move but really needs to accelerate. So we're going to be talking today more about what are these triple wins. How do we get to climate, nature, and equity through the financial systems that we're shifting, and make sure that the agenda sets targets that are actually both credible and include all of those key elements to this. We know that only 3% of the global climate finance at this point is going into food and agricultural systems, and that's another reason why this initiative is so incredibly important. We can show through the proof points that these investments make why investing into agriculture is justified and can be done at scale, the returns that it can demonstrate, and what it takes to actually deliver on those types of commitments. So we're going to be seeing in just a moment more on the Good Food Finance Network's High Ambition Group and the targets that are being set already by this group. What's incredibly important to know is that $13 billion of assets are included in these targets through this High Ambition Group that the GFFN has organized and is driving forward. That is big news. Let's raise the visibility on this, and let's start to show what that action looks like when it's invested. And that's some of what we're going to hear about from our speakers here in just a few minutes. So here's the work that we're going to be doing together. And again, focusing on the finance elements for this and the people-centered results that that finance can deliver here in the midst of the Climate COP on Finance Day is what we should all be raising and really accelerating against. I'm really pleased to hear from our panel, and Matt, with that, I'll turn it back over to you for more information on the targets that we're setting. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Diane. So what we're going to do now is just to introduce the High Ambition Group under the Good Food Finance Network. We have a short video to play which introduces the exciting new targets that are now being announced. Do you have the video?
Supports the food finance network and is proud of this kind of this ambition. The FAA cycle, we will discuss with improve land management practices in over 21 million hectares, mitigate 223 million tons of carbon dioxide, and at the same time reduce waste of chemicals and low 21,000 tons. This will be done working closely with the private sector to integrate approaches that provide multiple benefits, climate and nature, while protecting the rights and ensuring managers and trade.
I'm able to specialize in African food varieties. Atisa fosters suitable working conditions that support and encourage women to participate at all levels of food. By 2025, 90% of all career companies will have a gender policy. By 2030, at least 40% of all career companies will have a minimum of 40% female component and or 30% female leadership.
Union enables Mexican financial intermediaries to support the farmers. We are increasing financial flows for climate change adaptation through financing PPA for specific investment concepts in municipalities identified as vulnerable. Between 2023 and 2025, we intend to increase financing for adaptation by 5% per year from our current effort, totaling 24,000 million pesos, which today represents $1.2 billion for the 2023 to 25 period. By 2030, we propose to finance a total of 73,000 million pesos. That represents an accumulated $3.6 billion for the 2023 to 2030 period.
Living natural capital investing farmland and timber and dwelling provide our clients with investments to help them meet their natural goals. We aim to optimize food, fiber, and timber production and minimize our carbon footprint whilst working with partners with local communities. Protecting the environment and enhancing biodiversity, nature, agriculture, and wildlife. Completing a full inventory of our natural capital assets in 2023 to identify opportunities for improvement and evolving our zero deforestation policy launched in 2018 are examples of our commitments to the food and finance industry.
At Signature, we invest in African farms. Beyond committing to zero deforestation targets, we're starting to work to transition all our farms to regenerative principles, to investigate how regenerative agriculture can contribute to climate change adaptation, and to plan climate resilient restoration to creative lands.
Yarmouth provides fertilizers to farmers worldwide. Optimizing fertilizer application is crucial, both to support farmers' income and to reduce the risk of pollution. Hence, we are developing digital precision agriculture solutions, and we commit to 150 million digitized pathways by 2025, with a potential to reduce fertilizer use by up to 12% and to increase yields by up to 6%.
As you can clearly hear, financial institutions and businesses have an important role to play in supporting global efforts to fight the triple planetary crisis and climate change by diversity and pollution, as well as to advance on the other sustainable development goals. The Good Food Finance Network offers a platform to work together to finance the transition towards sustainable food systems. Get involved today.
Excellent. And I think you may have seen a few people who are going to feature in the panel we're about to have. And with that, I'd like to actually invite my panel to come up and join. Delighted today that we have Hannah Young, Head of ESG and Impact at Signature Agri Investments, who's joining us online. Barry Martin, Managing Board Member Wholesale and Royal Rabobank. Bernard Stormier, Vice President for Sustainability Governance at Yara International. And Matthew Bryan Reddy, Senior Private Sector Specialist at the Global Environment Facility. Please come and join me up here.
How do we do this? Yeah, so, yeah.
Okay, that one does work. Thank you very much. Lovely. Okay, so I'm very pleased to be able to start with our panel. Hannah, I'm going to start with you, please, if you can. It would be great to understand, why have you gone about this? Why are you setting these commitments? And we said this is the implementation COP. How are you actually going to take action?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. The reason why we have set targets and why we welcomed the opportunity to join the GFFN for Ambition Group is essentially so that we can be part of an organisation with enough vision and ambition to change the way that food is produced. I think we all know our current food system is broken. It's unsustainable in the true sense of the word. It literally cannot endure in its current form. Climate change is dramatically affecting food production, and agriculture is significantly worsening climate change in return. Soils are losing fertility, pollinators are in decline, water supplies are contaminated and reduced. More than 65% of Africa's land is not degraded, and 228 million people on the continent face chronic hunger. Agriculture has, to a large extent, caused these things. And agriculture, as we know it, will collapse because of these things, probably within our lifetimes. We have set ambitious targets in respect of climate change adaptation and mitigation, deforestation, and biodiversity impacts, not only because they correspond to our shared values as a company, but also because of pure self-interest. We didn't see the sector providing an discipline in this direction, and we think the way to shift it is to steer financial flows towards projects which adopt these standards. At an investor level, we need to safeguard the money entrusted to us for these projects. And at a simple human level, more and more people need food every single year, and our capacity to produce it is declining. Implementation, as you say, this is implementation. I mean, it's simple, just not to say we'll implement our own targets. We share the systemization. Let's be frank, there are two levels in which actions. When it comes to implementation, we don't stand a chance. We act alone. As with every aspect of the climate crisis, the only hope of shifting the course of this massive shift is through concerted effort and effective partnerships. We need investors to be conscious of what impact their money is having. We need smallholder farmers, particularly women, to be empowered to create resilient systems of their own. We need consumers to be aware of how their food is produced We need African regulators to take a longer-term view on risk, and we need European regulators to stop allowing pesticide bans in the EU to be sent to this continent. We need the GFFN and the Just Rural Transition to showcase and amplify the efforts of members, so that the example our targets provide will have a leverage effect. That is our implementation becomes both practical and effective. That's all.
That's great.
Thank you.
Great. That's good. Okay, that works? Okay. That's great. Thank you so much, Hannah. It's really great to hear about the action and particularly the partnership that you're working through. So Bernard, maybe if I can turn to you and frankly the same question, you know, why and how?
Yeah. So you can hear me okay? Yeah. So hello. Is this one better? Yeah. Okay, so first of all, the why. It's very simple. It's because the right thing to do. And not to repeat everything that was just said, but a little bit of it. We know that the food system is causing 1/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions. We know that agriculture is the most important driver for destruction of natural habitats. We know that a majority of the world's hungry people are themselves smallholder farmers who are working in the farm sector. We know the number of hungry people are increasing. We see that the war in Ukraine is demonstrating right in front of us that the food system is not resilient to large-scale shocks, and we will be seeing more large-scale shocks in the future driven by climate change. We also know that it is perfectly possible to feed the population in 2050 on the already existing farmland. There's no reason why agriculture needs to expand into forests, wetlands, rich natural habitats. So we know that it's the right thing to do. But then, as a business, there's another dimension to the why. It's the smart thing to do. We saw a recent study from Morningstar showing that sustainability-driven brands have grown significantly more than other brands over the last couple of years. I think it was like 2 times the growth in revenues. So we see that business-wise this makes sense. We also have services available in our system to support farmers who want to improve their environmental performance. So we want to compete in this space. We want to see that reduced crop carbon footprints is a commercial offering where we can compete against our competitors. So we really want to see a market where this is integrating into the competition, into what we can sell, into the services we can offer. So business-wise, it's smart. And lastly, it's about advocacy. So being part of the Good Food Finance Network is about bringing out the message that we will hope will bring scale to this ask about environmental services and sustainability performance in agriculture. So by bringing our voice to this collective advocacy to bring this message out, we actually want to help enable that market, that competition which we are preparing for. Because we all need to do better in order to deliver what we have promised that we will do by 2030. So we're dedicated to do it, but we can't do it alone. So GFFN is one way we're engaging in order to enable that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. And Barry, to you again.
Hi there, can everybody hear me? Yes? Okay. All right. Why are we joining? I think that's very important. I have a dream. We have a dream, actually. We think that food and agri-systems can be net positive. We think that actually agriculture should contribute and not take away. So if you think about it, right, in 2050, we say that we would emit 15 gigatons. 6 of them are actually land use. So that one, let's get rid of that. then we still need to solve 9. But if you look at the 9, they can be divided in 3 blocks. 3 gigatons is actually food waste, 3 gigatons is consumption, and 3 gigatons is the production. Imagine that we have that, right? So that goes to 4.5. In the last IPCC report, carbon sequestration was put at 4 gigatons. And replanting of trees was put at between 2 and 3 gigatons. And that's the use of the land. So actually, if you add all things together, we could be contributing with 2 gigatons to the environment. And that's the dream. And that's why we joined. That's the only thing I wanted to say.
That's a great and passionate rationale for why you would want to do this. Matthew, I want to turn to you. Jeff, what's your perspective? How do you see this?
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. So, Global Environment Facility, we're one of the public funders on the Good Food Finance Network. And indeed, it's a delight to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation. You know you're in the agricultural pavilion when the flyers come as well, which is a very nice addition so very well organised, Vita, to bring the flyers to the agricultural pavilion. So as a public funder, I guess our role is rather different. So our targets reflect, as Diane said in her opening remarks, it's great that we're here at the FCCC, the Framework Convention for Climate Change. Jeff also spans the CCD, and Hannah mentioned in her remarks land degradation and land degradation neutrality, which of course is the goal of the CCD. And then of course, as we have the Convention on Biological Diversity coming up in December. And so Jeff spans all of these conventions, and so our targets reflect our commitments to all of those convention goals, and also reflecting this need to do so in a just and equitable way. I think from Jeff's perspective, Diane also mentioned the rice finance. We're funding this particular program with an adaptation focus and a least developed country focus. So that's a very important contribution that we're making as well. I want to emphasise the adaptation component of what we're doing as much as the mitigation component. And then we're also working with Rabo and FMO and with UNEP on the Agri 3 fund. And I think for the Jeff, as a public funder, we want to be able to do much, much more with the private sector. And I think when we think about the GFFN, yes, we're interested in the good part. Yes, we're interested in the food part. And yes, we're interested in the good food finance part. But really, it's in the N. It's in the network. And I think that's really where we're interested in working with the GFFN, is working through this collaboration of partners and participating and raising the bar as part of this high ambition network. So looking forward to taking these discussions forward and creating more opportunities for transition through finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. I mean, that's great. I think you've actually pulled on a number of the threads that have come up in all the interventions we've had so far, the need to address multiple challenges through this, but also that issue of engaging with stakeholders, working through a network, collaboration, and actually that's a nice segue into what I'd like to do now, which is actually to open up to the floor. And while you're thinking about any questions you might have for the panel, I'd like to, in particular, invite a perspective and some reflections, responses with a voice from the farmers. So please, can I?
So, hello everyone. I am Khushbu from Mauritius and also representative from the World Farmers Organization. I'm also a vegetable grower and a project coordinator in agricultural projects. So, I just want to say that just like the group is mentioned, the high ambitious group. So, the projects are highly ambitious. The strategies are highly ambitious, so it would be really interesting to see the implementation, the outcomes. And what I wanted to add is that, yes, we cannot just rely on the government just to take all the decisions on financing. We need the private sectors to step in. We really need first actions, but also to direct funding in the right way, maybe. linkages have to be created on the public side, private sector side. So we need to find like that sort of strategy, the co-solution, co-participation. So I just wanted to know like what are your intakes as well if we consider like monetizing on carbon capture, because I know some countries are doing that. So are you involved in those projects? Do you have the public collaboration in that on the carbon capture monetization? Because it's like creating a buzz during this time. So I wanted to have views on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And a great, I think, first question from our panel. Yes, please. Already a volunteer.
Question. So it's an excellent question, and we are directly involved in that. We have a special company owned by Agoro Carbon Alliance. So they have more than 500,000 acres of farmland and helping the farmers to establish regenerative agricultural practices, and thereby generating carbon that adds a new revenue stream to the farmers. This is still small scale, but I think this is crucially important going forward, and it's one way how the farmers can actually get paid to do the right thing. We also know that this is a win-win situation, because increased carbon sequestration in soils also make the farm more resilient in periods of drought. So it also adds to the resilience dimension. And in an audience, people have a financial mindset. There's also one question that comes to my mind. If carbon has a price, shouldn't farmers be able to use their soils as collateral to reduce the interest rates on their loans? How can we make that happen? I don't have the answer. We're an operational company, not a financial company. But I think it's a really interesting discussion if we take all aspects into consideration when we put the price on carbon.
Please.
Well, I think it's a great question. Look, we have divided that at Rabo in certain things. One thing is, how do you deal with carbon for smaller farmers, and how do you deal with larger farmers, and how you deal with actually with large corporates. It's completely different way you have to look at it and how you have to deal with it. So in the case of the smaller farmers, what we started is Project Acorn. And what we are doing there is paying the farmers for their social environmental services, because they grow trees on their farms. You need the trees for shade, you need the trees for stopping erosion, you need the trees to get better rooting systems. So what we have done, we started to pay every farmer for the delta of growth of trees on their farm. We already have, at this moment, 50,000 smallholder farmers on the project. Today, we started the auction of 10,000 tons. And we have been able to increase the income of those farmers. It's in Kenya and Tanzania, the projects. And we are now going to Mozambique and looking at Latin America. And we can get 80% of the value of what we have sold those carbon for in the market. We sold it in the London market. So very interesting, good investors. 30 years carbon, so it's long term. The prices are now around $25 to $30 the ton of carbon. It's happening today. We are doing it. Auction is out there. We have a lot of bids. You can still go out there, auction. You can still bid for those carbons. So that's for the smallholder. And we think this project can scale up to millions, and we will do that. That's very active right now. We are using satellite technology. We are using Solidaridad to do the last mile, and really getting 80% of the money there. $200 per hectare, for every smallholder farmer. That makes a difference, you know, right? If you're on $2 plus a day. Then you have the large farmers. What we are doing there, we are going to all continents and measuring and working on how do you do sequestration? How does it work? What is legislation? How can you improve actually the cash flow from it? And the idea here is that you pre-finance those projects and you are actually repaid through carbon credits and not through cash flow, not through money. So you say, okay, your commitment is on how much carbon are you going to generate, and you pay us back through the carbon. And that's why we created the carbon bank. So making it pretty much linked to what you're doing, because the danger here is that we link a carbon to the price of wheat. The thing is, the price of wheat doesn't work the same way as the price of carbon works, because there are two different markets. So we are trying all over the world, trying to say how does it work in different jurisdictions. And we have two more movements. The third one is actually talking to our large wholesale clients. How do you look at Scope 3? How are we going to integrate that in your Scope 3? Because 70% of the solution of Scope 3 of the food systems actually are coming beyond the farm gate. And the last one is that we are spending a lot of money in training our account managers. Our account managers, they have to go on farm, at the kitchen table, talk about it at all, either by large farmers, medium-sized farmers, smaller farmers, and in the boardroom. Because also in the large corporates, like Yara, you need to have the right discussion and the right dialogue at the boardroom. And we are trying to link that. So it's very young, this whole market. So thank you for the question. It's very young. But we are testing a lot. But I'm very happy that especially with the Acorn, we are already getting really money to the smaller farmers. And this is something they have to do anyhow to grow trees on their farms. Thank you.
So I want to get to Hannah online. If please.
Sure, that is a great question. It's something we've been engaged with directly very recently. I'm sure most agricultural investors have. First of all, a shout out to Acorn. We've been engaging with them quite closely, and I'm so impressed with the work that they've been doing. So thank you to Rabobank for their contribution there too. In terms of, we're obviously looking very closely and doing a lot of modeling on how we can monetize carbon, different scales of operation, both for regenerative agriculture practices and for reforestation. So as you all know, farming in Africa, you end up with quite large land areas which are non-arable. And if you put those together, you really end up with very substantial amounts of what could be quite pristine forest. I think the biggest obstacle to us currently is just not having any certainty on how the carbon pricing is going to work out in the long term. When you're looking at something which is going to be producing carbon sequestration significant amounts only in 5 to 7 years, and you have no confirmation of what the market's going to be, that makes it very difficult. And I think what the market needs to catch up on there is the pricing of externalities that are coming into that. What are the additional benefits? Why isn't biodiversity being properly priced into the sequestration market? So that's something we're engaged with. The other thing we're engaged with now is on the regenerative side, is we're finding quite a dearth of practical case examples for how much can be sequestrated through different practices in different African biomes. So on that note, I'm happy to tell you that we've formed a small, relatively informal working group with some other African agricultural investors, and we'll be reaching out to more of those, where we plan to spend sort of the next 2 years doing field testing on quite large areas, different regenerative practices in different biomes with different rainfalls, measuring, getting very quantitative results from that, and producing a kind of handbook and some definitive case studies. So that's what we're doing from our small side.
Thank you, Hannah. And Matthew, I know you wanted to come in on this as well. If I can ask you to be as brief as you can so we have time for a question from the floor before we close.
Okay, very briefly, I'd like to frame my response with the just rural transition lens. And when we consider carbon, if you're an Australian carbon farmer, a Canadian, especially in the Alberta scheme, California, you're getting upwards of $30. The prices this year have peaked at $68 per tonne of carbon sequestered. These are farmers in developed countries, and farmers in Australia, people hear me say this a lot, and it's, I'll get on my soapbox again. Why should a farmer in Australia doing exactly the same practices as a farmer in Malawi or a farmer in Namibia get $68 a tonne, and these farmers not be compensated for the equivalent work that they're doing? And I think that there's a couple of things that we can do here. First of all is to promulgate these schemes that the private sector is leading, I think that's a really valuable contribution. And then on the public sector side, how can we improve not just land tenure, but the important carbon tenure, tree tenure, and water tenure that goes along with that, and is really the enabling environment for such emissions trading schemes to flourish. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Matthew. And I think we possibly have time for a very quick question from the floor directed to a panelist. So there's only one person that's indicated they have a question for me. Oh, I'm sorry. There are many questions for us, but we will not be able to cover. I'm terribly sorry. Would you like to, please?
Thank you very much to the panelists. So my question would be around how you measure sustainable agriculture.
How to measure sustainable agriculture, please.
I can have a go if you like.
Hannah, please, if you can.
So we've been using our own self-developed metrics to date, but what we want to do now, and we'll be starting it the first farm in Malawi quite soon, is using the Regen Agri tool, which there's a relationship with the Cool Farm tool, and they've just been acquired by Solidaridad. So we're hoping that will become quite a widespread use of standard for measuring sustainability metrics.
Thank you very much. It's clear we much richer, much longer discussion than the 45 strict minutes we're allowed. With that, I'm going to close off our panel. Thank you all for joining us, and I'm sorry we couldn't get to all the questions at the very last minute. I'll hand over at this point to Eric Usher, who is, please, Eric, come and join us from UNEP FI. Thank you all to all of our panelists. Thank you all for joining us. Eric, if you can close us off with your final closing remarks on what you've heard.
Thanks very much, Matt. And as you say, this is a conversation it's hard to finish, which is, I think, a healthy indication. So UNEP FI, we convene a number of the GFANZ alliances you might be aware of, including the Banking Alliance, and they actually issued their progress report today as part of Finance Day. Within that report, they are stating the targets they are setting, which they're required to set in the first 18 months in their priority sectors, and then over 36 in all 9 high-emitting sectors, including agriculture. So this first set of targets, interestingly, 24 banks have stated their emissions footprint in the agricultural sector, and 3 have set preliminary targets, including Rabobank. But watch this space, because we have 122 banks, all of which are required to do so as of 36 months of joining. The agricultural sector is challenging, as you know very well, I think both in terms of data gathering and setting targets. And targets set lending portfolios, and for scope 1 and 2. And we heard about scope 3. It's challenging. Work needs to be done, but it's critical to get it there. I think very importantly, all targets disclosed have covered all greenhouse gas. Very good practice for the sector, where gases like gasoline and nitrous oxide are certainly material. So in closing, 3 key points. Finance sector plays a critical role here. Financial institutions and the value chain actors with significant portfolio exposure to food and agriculture have a really important role to play. They need to be partners in action. They underpin strong economic recovery, climate action, nature protection. Playing a role there, including on food systems, is critical. Banks, investors, insurers, agribusinesses, they can really help influence clients and suppliers to improve their policies and drive financial flows towards more sustainable food systems. Second message, we really, an urgent transition in food systems is inevitable, okay? And this is what everyone needs to understand. Food systems really sit at the intersection of the environmental and social challenges, and feeding a global population while advancing socioeconomic development and reducing emissions from agricultural and food systems is going to bring major challenges, but of course, lots of opportunity. My third point, I think the first tranche of work targets from the High Ambition Group, it really provides feasible frameworks for action. And I mentioned the NESBA, the Net Zero Banking Alliance, which is a much bigger group. It's 40% of the banking sector. measured by assets, they need leaders to show them how to do it. And so networks like the GFFN, who are proving out, setting the staff norms about how you do it. It's not only about what they're doing in their own organizations, but it's about the influence they have on the wider financial community and at the private sector at large. I think this is a really important first step. We will call UNIPFI, will help as our involvement to say how do we get financial sector and policymakers to really supersize their ambition in this space. We would hope to see similar commitments coming from the wider community over time, and we'll be working towards very ambitious targets. We need to be connecting the dots between the different programs that are out there, between the groupings of first mover, the coalitions of the willing, and the broader knowing that we need to happen. Because the first movers will often state, it's fine for me to do what I do, but if nobody follows me, I don't really have a sustainable business offering over time. So in closing, financial decision makers, both public and private, we need to work together to accelerate. We have no time to waste. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you very much, everybody, to our panel, to Hannah Online, to the fantastic intervention from the floor, which stimulated such great discussion. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much, Eric.
Hi, Hannah.
Oh, thanks for that. Thanks, Tom.
No problem. I was watching in the back.
Check, check. Check, check, check. Check, check.